It's time for us to have a discussion. It's time for us to have a discussion today about something that really nobody in Wuthering Waves has been talking about because, well, I don't think anyone has viewed it as an issue because, frankly, I think Kuro actually knows how to balance their game. And that is the idea of HP inflation in WuWa's end game modes. And so we have a video here prepared by Kaiser, who's actually one of my mods, so a little bit of self-promotion. But this is something that I've kind of like asked him to work on in the background because I wanted to have like a balanced viewpoint on the whole HP inflation issue because, of course, we've been talking about it in a lot of other games that have fundamentally been completely fucked up by it. Think the HSRs, the Genshin Impacts, and the ZZZs. I've made plenty of those videos on my channel. So with that, why don't we have one for WuWa and see what it's all about? We also got the actual chart and the data too.
Hello there, Kaiser here. I finally finished tracking Wuthering Waves' Tower of Adversity HP values that I've
Okay, why do you sound like you're like dying?
been working on for the past month. Your first question might be asking, why is it taking you so long? Why don't you just use Hakushin, that one data mine compilation site for the big 4 gacha games, like you did for Zenless Zone Zero Shiyu Defense HP values? Well, I'll get into that. As for Tower of Adversity HP values, there's at least 2 times where Hakushin popped up on Twitter. First by Lunar Emerald around 2 months ago, and then again by White Zeh about a week ago on May 27th. I actually responded to White Zeh's post, seeing that
We're gonna have to speed you up a little bit, Kaiser. You're talking in like 0.75. We're gonna get you back to normal.
I was about to finish my HP values chart, and pointed out how Hakushin was doing weird stuff with their HP values. And so maybe I guess White Zed took down his post to avoid spreading misinformation, but he was kind enough to provide me with his records of Hakushin's data, so I might compare how Hakushin's base values compare to live server values in a future update. Oh, and
Yeah, so basically, Hakushin, whatever they show for their data, they just show certain base values of HP that there's a further modifier placed on to actually get the real HP for a boss. And so Hakushin was basically showing that the 2 Diurnus Knights that we just saw over here in this clear that were fighting at the beginning had more HP than the Fallacy of No Return, which is fundamentally wrong.
how Hakushin's base values compare to live server values in a future update. Oh, and that one joke chart that was shared on St. Tontus' stream by one of his hate watchers. But Hakushin isn't accurate with those numbers. What I think is that they are base values, and then there is a file that modifies enemy HP values based on the kind of content you will fight them in. That being said, I spent the greater part of the last month taking screenshots of HP bars of current and past TOA clears, dumping them in Photoshop, pulling out the ruler tool, and using that to count pixels based on the amount of damage that was dealt to the enemy.
Yeah, he was doing all of this. That's why he sounds a little bit depressed. So there is a reason. There is a reason, ladies and gents.
And holy shit, there are so many HP bars. I did the same thing for Zenless Zone Zero on one occasion. Well, let's just say it wasn't a good experience. Zenless Zone Zero HP bars wobble inside the UI casing. Not to mention the design of the casing is slanted and it's not really clear where the HP bar ends. That being said, the number that I had measured from a kind Zenless Zone Zero player on the St. Tontus server that provided me a clip, let's just say that counting the numbers was difficult, measuring the HP bar was difficult, and I don't think I'm going to be verifying all of the ZZZ values because I can't really expect anyone to not sweat on the game and take a break to let the HP bar wobble around so I can find a good frame to start measuring from. Even then, the number that I measured out was quite close to what Hakushin had, so I'll continue trusting Hakushin with Zenless Zone Zero for now. Anyways, I got this pixel measurement technique from my time in Destiny 2. Destiny 2... I miss well skating.
I'm just gonna skip on this part. I'm sorry, Kaiser. I don't care about Destiny 2.
I counted pixels using the Photoshop ruler. I probably should have used pixel count, but I only thought of it after filling out the entire sheet. Oh, sue me. And so here we are. Yes, ZZZ's numbers are going up, Genshin's have gone up too, and you all know the situation with HSR. Wuthering Waves has HP inflation as well. But keep in mind that mechanics featuring damage reduction, which have been implemented in each of the Hoyoverse titles, have not yet come to Wuthering Waves. In this case, raw HP values can only tell a part of the story because damage per second is a metric that happens while combat is going on and is not clearly reflected on paper.
So let's see it over here, right? HP inflation has occurred, ladies and gentlemen. It has occurred. And what you'll see over here, right, is something pretty damn simple. It started going up right about in version 2.0. That's where kind of like the peak has occurred. And then it started going down and has stayed pretty level from there, right? About version 2.0 and then slightly a little bit. But you want to know what the big thing is about some of the buffs that we're having in the current version of the TOA, all of this stuff? Yeah, let me show you all something really fast about the current version of the TOA. In version 2.3, where there's actually a decent amount of HP inflation, we just saw it over here as a whole, it's a little bit higher. It's kind of like breaking the norm in the trend. This is the very unique thing about the TOA buff in the middle tower. Yeah, it just gives a flat 20% attack increase to everybody. This is potentially the first TOA buff in the history of the game that just gives a flat 20% attack buff to every single unit that's on the battlefield. I have never seen this before where it just says everybody's attack is increased. So yeah, on the one instance where there's meaningful HP inflation with no DPS characters in the game that scale off HP or defense, all this does is it just buffed everybody's attack up and there was an according amount of, I guess, HP increase while those attacks were buffed up. So yeah, this is literally more than a one cost echo. This is about two substats, two high range substats worth of attack. This is half of a Shorekeeper S2. This is more of a buff than Shorekeeper's weapon. And so they added a universal buff that impacts everybody. And that's where the most meaningful jump has been. Similarly though, you might be wondering, oh, what about 2.0 and all the stuff that occurred over here? So it's pretty safe to say, right, at the very, very start of the game, when people don't necessarily have great investment on their echoes, they don't have a lot of access to, you know, actually like the plus 20 pieces, fully leveled out characters. There's literally a weekly boss mat constraint, so people literally cannot have 10 out of 10 abilities or maxed out units. The HP was not as high, right? Because a weekly boss constraint literally means that some of your abilities on your units will be stuck at 6 out of 10, 8 out of 10. And then once those limiters were basically released, right? And you can max out every single ability on a character's team, that's when the HP went up. And it's not even by that much though. Do recognize that there are many games out there that are over double, more than 100% of the launch values. WuWa is stuck at around 50% of the launch values. And remember, those launch values were balanced around people having 6 out of 10 on their skills, not maxed out echoes, nothing close to like double crit on every single piece. And so we're at 50% in 1 year. Or sorry, is that 39%? Oh. Yeah, it's about 30. Yeah, it's realistically around 39%. Oh, never mind. Oh man, I was wrong. It's not 50%, it's 39. Ooh. 42% at a total. Ooh, that's not that much. Yeah, that's not that much, I'm gonna be honest, especially when you compare it to games like ZZZ. That is, in version 1.7, it had a 58% HP inflation from version 1.4. 58% in 3 patches. And and WuWa in almost quadruple or quintuple that number of patches, it's at 42. And the big jump that we're seeing over here is because we have a 20% attack buff on every single character. But you might be wondering, oh boy, what about 2.0 or like 1.4 R3, which bled into 2.0? Wasn't that high too? You wanna know what they added to the game in 2.0 that also explains some of the HP inflation? Yeah, you guys know about these? The Nightmare Echoes, which fundamentally increase the DPS of literally every character in the game. Specifically, a character like Camellia, who previously was using Dreamless, which gave no passive buffs to her damage bonuses, or Crownless, regular Crownless, right? Who buffed Resonant skill damage, which she dealt none of. And instead, she got a Nightmare Echo that gave her a buff of 12% Havoc and 12% basic attack, which is her main damage type. And every single DPS in the game was given a 4-cost Nightmare Echo that did the exact same thing and simply required activation in the main slot, and so it saved you rotation time as well, because you didn't need to do that silly little thing where you would swap onto the character before using your sub DPS's outro skill, waste a little bit of time just to be able to activate the buff. So yeah, that is the thing, ladies and gentlemen. There was HP inflation in 2.0 as well, only 15%, right? 15, 18, 19%, about 5 to 10% more, especially as you get into 2.1 and 2.2. That's because Kuro actually gave people time to farm the Nightmare Echoes and see the big increase in overall team and personal DPS of the characters over time. So yeah, every single time time there's actual HP inflation in the game, it's in small amounts, and it's tailored around very specific buffs in the TOA or gameplay updates to the game. And when it came to the Nightmare Echoes, which constituted, right, a decent amount, they gave people 2 updates to farm them and a bunch of TOA resets to farm the new Nightmare Echoes before actually putting it into the game and actually putting it into the TOA. Because you can clearly see for 3 resets in 2.0, there was barely any increase at all. That is why, ladies and gentlemen, there's so little discussion about HP inflation in Wuthering Waves, because these devs don't require you to feel the need to pull the newest on-banner unit. And in fact, in the Zani reset, there was really barely any HP inflation at all. Almost none, if we're frankly being honest. The Zani reset. Y'all remember that one, right? Zani was clearing the middle tower in like 30 seconds. She was run rotating it because the HP was not inflated and the tower buff of 100% spectral damage amp was so ridiculous that Zani in her best in slot team was actually clearing it in 1 rotation. That could have been an opportunity for Kuro to actually be predatory because they could have easily HP inflated like crazy, gave the Zani tower buff that amplified her spectral frazzle damage, which all of her attacks in her forte are by 100%, and then she would have been the only character that felt good. And this is the thing. I'll show an exact photo of that exact TOA reset. And you want to know the funny thing about it? 2.3's TOA reset is a little stinky. Spectral frazzle damage is amplified by 100%. Heavy attack damage bonus is increased by 20%. I even called it out when it wasn't really that big of a problem. Yeah, I immediately called this shit out and said it's kind of stinky. It's a little predatory, but the HP isn't high enough for it to actually be a problem. And that's what it means to have developers that aren't just trying to fuck you with the end game and fuck you with the on-banner unit by shilling the shit out of it. Because I'm going ahead, right? Let's see what the clear times were. Using a fucking Gion team, a 1.0 unit. 3:47, a minute and 13 seconds. Using a 1.0 unit. That's how these devs balance this game. And I probably would get it in 1 minute if Gion had a better sub DPS and wasn't using a fucking 4-star on his team. This is why nobody talks about the HP inflation in Wuthering Waves, because it's literally not an issue. And if the number does go up, then they have the stuff in the game that will go ahead and mitigate it. That dragon also resists Mortify attacks, so I'm using a sub DPS who's dealing literally 0 damage, or has 40% damage reduction. And so yeah, when there's HP inflation, they'll have a tower buff like this. I mean, what else can you say, ladies and gentlemen? That's why this game feels balanced. The devs would instead rather you are interested in the character kits, you're interested in what they do, instead of trying to just shill by making the end game feel fucking terrible if you don't pull them. You pull based off your desire of the kit and how fun they are to play, not because you feel pressured to by the end game. That's my overall take on the issue. That's all the data that we're seeing in the charts over here. Let's hear a little bit about what Kaiser's saying over here.
Keep in mind that mechanics featuring damage reduction, which have been implemented in each of the Hoyoverse titles, have not yet come to Wuthering Waves. In this case, raw HP values can only tell a part of the story because damage per second is a metric that happens while combat is going on and is not clearly reflected on paper.
The HP inflation is not even close to where it is in Hoyo games. And there's no damage reduction mechanics, 100%. There's no mechanic where it's like, hey, you need Spectral Frazzle to be on the boss, or it has 70% damage reduction. There's no mechanic where it's like, you need Arrow Erosion on the boss, or it's gonna take half damage from every attack. You just get slight buffs to your damage output that aren't even that significant. Like, this tower buff is like, oh great, 40% crit damage. Awesome. Chikona is one of the worst characters you can use on this tower reset. Like, her teams aren't even like that good in this tower reset. It's literally better not to use her teams. Just Carlotta Hypercarry will perform better on this reset than Chikona teams, which don't even use any of the buffs at all.
I don't know whether it's necessary for me to say this, but damage reduction, defense increase, invulnerability phases, whatever you want to call it, is just another word for HP inflation.
And ZZZ has HP inflation of 40 to 50 to 60%, and all of these. So the reality, right, of these numbers that we see for ZZZ is that it's actually worse than what we see over here. Because on top of the HP inflation, they have all of the defense mechanics, all of the invulnerability windows, all of that stuff right on top of all of it.
This is my take on the matter, though. HP inflation is a natural part of a live service game's lifespan, as a measure to keep players engaged with a challenge as they acquire new characters and or better gear.
And we already talked about all the Nightmare Echo stuff, and the fact that in 1.0, nobody was able to get level 10 on their skills, and nobody was able to really get good plus 25 echoes.
HP inflation only becomes an issue when it becomes rampant, increasing in a short period of time as a result of developers underestimating how much additional power is given to players in a short period of time. This is when the
And Kuro decided to delay their HP inflation even after the release of the new mechanics to probably get some data to see how much the new Nightmare Echoes were impacting clears, and then adjusted them up very, very, very slightly.
player base calls a new character or new equipment imbalanced. Having said that, with the way Kuro does their balancing and testing, Wuthering Waves' first limited character, our General GN, can still handedly stomp tower, and he doesn't even have his premium sub-DPS yet. Perhaps this may incentivize Hoyoverse content creators to showcase past limited characters for team lineups, tackle the endgame, and see if they are still able to clear at C0, E0, M0, and with a base rank signature or two. I only include this restriction because much of the player base does not spend money or are monthly sub only, and it's in their best prolonged enjoyment to not pull past the initial copy of a character, and I expect fewer players to have signatures in the first place.
Oh, but ZZZ players are over here looking at Hako's video saying that miasma's not an issue in ZZZ because, look, guys, my Corrin team is clearing. I'm clearing it in 1 minute and 30 seconds with a 4-star unit. Guys, look, it can't be that bad. Look, Corrin's doing it. Let's just disregard the fact that I have a $1,000 support on the team helping her out with M2 and her signature light cone. And then the other support is M1, also with their signature light cone. So even the support characters, which most people typically don't get the signature W engine for, they all have it. And I'm gonna use that as evidence that the clear times aren't that bad. I'm not gonna lie. I feel like this is an awful fucking clear time for that much investment. I feel like this is an awful fucking clear time if I'm spending $2,000 on my supports. You spent $2,000 on your supports. I feel like the clear time should be better because believe me, if I go into Wuthering Waves and I spend $2,000 on my sub DPS and I get like an S2 shorekeeper, though it would, I mean, if I try to spend $2,000 in Wuthering Waves on my supports, I'd probably end up with an S6 if I'm frankly being honest. No, I would definitely end up with a fucking S6. Yeah, I guess S2 units in Wuthering Waves, they cost, I mean, nothing because you can just use the Coral Shop. It's like with an S2 shorekeeper and then, you know, an S2 Chacona, my Gion is definitely clearing that in like 45 seconds. He's clearing that in 2 rotations. But I simply just choose not to do it because there's absolutely no need to. And we're out here spending 2,000 bucks in ZZZ on these fucking teams, and we're getting 1 minute 30-second clears. I honestly think it should probably be faster if you're spending that much money on the fucking game. That's just my take though. Clearly the ZZZ devs can decide to balance however they want. And if they want M2 to be the baseline to make your 4-star characters not feel like fucking unusable, hey, then you are the new HSR. Where you have creators like Mr. Pokey saying, you should be getting E2 Robin and her light cone, E2 Sunday and his light cone if you want to make your older members usable. You guys should be doing that. Don't be greedy and stupid. Get your E2 Sunday and your E2 Robin. And now it's going to be don't be greedy and stupid. You got to make sure you get your M2 Astra Yao, your M1 Trigger. You got to get Trigger's W engine. Yeah, you ask any WuWa player, not a single fucking one that isn't a whale has been pressured to pull the fucking sequence nodes. And that's because, ladies and gentlemen, these devs actually know how to balance their fucking game. 39 in the side towers, 42% in the middle towers. HP inflation since the launch of the game. And the launch of the game is when everyone has purple echoes, 6 out of 10 skills. Damn, that's crazy, isn't it? I think those are like my final thoughts over here. I think that Kaiser probably has like a big little breakdown over here. I think that a lot of CCs should be watching this, specifically the Hoyo ones. I think we're gonna cut off the video over here because we got into probably a lot about what he's gonna be talking about, so we don't wanna over dip too much into the content. That's my take on everything. That's why nobody talks about HP inflation in Wuthering Waves, because it's not a problem. And we got the glue. Let me know what you all think. Peace.